Hello, my name is James Trajari and I'm the Executive Director at Legal Assistance for Seniors. It is my honor to welcome you to today's program, Transforming Elder Abuse Through Integrative Mediation, presented by Kamela and Anaisa Seneda. This is the first in our series of 4 webinars addressing various topics on elder abuse. As you all probably know, when we hold the conference in person, it takes many dedicated people and agencies coming together to produce such a large function. And this webinar series is no different. First, I would like to thank our sponsors who continue to support the conference in a webinar format. Their continued dedication and excitement for the work we do is critical for the success of this webinar series, and we offer our deepest gratitude. In particular, we'd like to thank our diamond level sponsor, Michael Stevens, Probate and Trust Realtor. Michael Stevens has always been an incredible support to LAS and is always there to help with great enthusiasm. If it involves supporting older adults, Michael is always there with a big yes and how can I help. In addition to a high level of professionalism, Michael and his team at Corican Global Living Real Estate bring much empathy and compassion to the many probate and trust sales that they handle. Michael approaches each transaction, whether for his customers or for working with conservators, attorneys, or other fiduciaries, with real understanding. Thanks to you and Corican Global Living, Michael, for your steadfast support of LAS over the years. We have a whole host of sponsors, which we will announce in just a moment. We thank our sponsors for their steadfast commitment to this webinar series and to our mission of protecting older adults' rights and dignities in Alameda County. In addition, Golden Gate University has continued to support LAS in this webinar series with technical support and serving as an honorary event host. We greatly appreciate this partnership with GGU. Last but not least is the team that has contributed their time and hard work over the past several months to transition this in-person conference to an online experience. Greg Bedard, Jenny Pardini, Shauna Reeves, and the entire LAS staff, thank you. Now for some housekeeping before we get started with today's program. We have a wonderful presentation followed by a live Q&A. If you have a question, please submit it through the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. Staff will be monitoring these questions for the moderator. We will try to get to all your questions, but if we're not unable to answer everything during the session, we will do our best to follow up with you after the presentation. For those who need continuing education units, you will receive a post-event email within a day or two of this session with steps on redeeming your credits. Lastly, we welcome your feedback to help us improve your experience and continue to offer high quality education through a post-event survey. As I'm sure you're aware, today's presentation is part of a series of 4 webinars LAS is producing in the coming weeks. They are all free of charge and open to the public, though a donation of $25 per webinar will be greatly appreciated and accepted in order to support our ongoing work. We hope you find these presentations informative and useful. You can register for these webinars by visiting our website, lashighcap.org. That's LASHICAP.org, and going to events. Thank you again for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the program.
Good afternoon. My name is Jenny Pardini, and I am the Community Education Coordinator with Legal Assistance for Seniors. I'm delighted to be your moderator for this webinar. Today, you'll hear a 1-hour educational presentation from our guest speakers, followed by a Q&A that I will be moderating. If you have any questions for our speakers, please submit them at any point during the program by clicking on the Q&A icon at the bottom of the meeting screen. If you have any technical issues, you can ask us in the chat and our technical team will do their best to assist you. If you would like to use the closed caption feature, click on the live transcript button at the bottom of the meeting screen and choose Show Subtitle. Before we get started with today's speakers, I'd like to acknowledge the sponsors for this webinar series. As Jim previously mentioned, we have Michael Stevens with Corican Global Living as our diamond level sponsor. The Tile Shop with their showroom in neighboring Berkeley, and Acuna Regli with business in estate planning, probate and trust administration, and conservatorship and special needs trusts are 2 gold level sponsors. At the silver level, we have the law firm of Anderson, Yazdi, Wang, Minton, and Horn LLP, Ingrid Evans with the Evans Law Firm, the Professional Fiduciary Association of California, and Senior Alternatives. At the bronze level, we have ARM Homes. Many thanks also to Zur Institute and CAPA PGPC for providing continuing education units for attendees of this webinar. And sincerest gratitude to our community partners, the Alameda County Area Agency on Aging, the East Bay Foundation on Aging, the California Elder Justice Coalition, Legal Aid Association of California, California Advocates for Nursing Home Reform, and the Elder Abuse Prevention Program at the Institute on Aging. Thank you again to our wonderful sponsors. Kamela and Anaisa, you're welcome to join on screen now. It is my pleasure to introduce you to today's speakers, Kamela Love, JD, and Anaisa Seneda. Kamela Love is the founder of Integrate Legacy Dispute Resolution, a private practice that exclusively offers mediation and professional facilitation services for families who want to repair and preserve their relationships rather than to sue each other in court. She believes that just about any conflict can be mediated with willing participants and mutual commitment to create a win-win solution. Kamela graduated undergrad as valedictorian and magna cum laude from Santa Clara University and earned her law degree from Southwestern Law School in Los Angeles. Kamela became a DRPA certified mediator in 2010. A skilled mediator with notable presence of mind, Anaisa Seneda has experience with emotionally charged cases involving trauma, trained in clinical psychoanalysis, behavioral coaching, and Ayurveda psychology. She facilitates difficult conversations and supports the co-regulation of the nervous system in mediation sessions. Anaisa is a trauma-informed professional experienced in sensitive cases involving morale damage, misconduct, abuse of power, and sexual abuse. She has also managed accountability processes based on restorative justice. Kamela and Anaisa, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. It's an honor and pleasure to be here. Hello, everyone. I am going to share my screen. All right, so it's a pleasure to be here with you today. And this topic that we'll be talking about is very near and dear to both mine and Anaisa's hearts. We've both been mediators for quite a while, and we've learned that the emotions in a dispute are, in fact, a very important part. So we'll be sharing with you today a mediation model that really incorporates and addresses the emotional aspect of the dispute. I have the pleasure of joining Anaisa in her company, Safe Mediation, earlier this year. So we work together in Safe Mediation. She'll share more about that with you. And I have my own mediation practice called Integrate Legacy Dispute Resolution, which I founded in California over 10 years ago. And I just moved to Austin, Texas earlier this year. So I'm now in Austin, and I operate mediations out of both my solo practice and working in co-mediation with Anaisa under the umbrella Safe Mediation. And we've both been trained in restorative justice models, and we use that in our conflict resolution work. I've come to specialize in mediation services for families specifically, because I've found that the type of mediations that light me up the most are the ones that involve family relationships, lasting relationships, where people are invested in working through the drama and the conflict that they're experiencing so they can basically have improved relationships through the mediation process. So that's the work that we do. It's really a healing model and very different from the court-ordered mediations that you might be more familiar with. Anaisa.
Thank you, Kamela, for the introduction. And yes, to talk a little bit more about safe mediation, when I started back a few years ago, it was more focused on facilitating negotiations in corporate between businesses, clients, and suppliers. And I got involved more and more in highly emotional cases and cases of harassment, of abuse. And I also got more and more involved with family offices and family businesses. And then I was shifting then from corporate towards more family relations. And I ended up specializing in the recent years in situations, very delicate situations of involving abuse, and sometimes even situations of criminal abuse, and that can be combined as a support tool, even in cases that are taken to court. But what the work we do, as Kamela said, is very much unique in the way we carved it, and we tailor-made it case by case, and we have protocols to really integrate not only the financial aspects or the legal aspects, but especially the emotional, psychological aspects as well. And we will be talking more about this integration that we bring to our work today. Thank you so much for being here.
All right, so we're going to ask y'all to participate by typing in the chat so we can get a feel for who our audience is. So we have a couple different common elder abuse scenarios. So caregiver sibling moves in and starts managing money. Caregiver sibling moves into elder parent's home and starts managing the elder parent's money as the elder parent is starting to decline in their cognitive abilities. The other sibling or siblings are distrustful and accusing the caregiver sibling of mismanaging the parent's funds. Let's see, just type in the chat if you have dealt with that scenario in your work. And we'll throw up a second scenario here so you can type in the chat if you've dealt with this one. Second scenario, siblings put parent into an elder care facility. The medical caregivers are physically or psychologically abusing the elder patient. Who has dealt with that scenario? So we welcome your shares in the chat box. And what we want to highlight is what's most important for these families.
I'm just going to interrupt. Sorry. One of the attendees said that the chat is disabled. So I don't know if we can give them access to the chat, Grace. But sorry for that interruption. That's why they didn't respond.
Thank you. I was curious. Thank you, Jennifer. Okay. Well, these are questions for you to ponder as you read them on the screen. So what's most important for these families? We have a raised hand, Jennifer. Maybe you can go to Barbara.
Or maybe that's another way for them to signal, like maybe the raise hand is a function that is enabled.
Okay, so yeah, raise your hand. Yeah, raise your hand if you've dealt with either of these scenarios.
Wow, that's working. 7, 8, 10, 15 participants. It's growing.
Oh, and now we have the chat enabled. Okay, yes, yes, yes to both, yes to both. Okay, so now you can type in the chat, folks. And so go ahead and type in the chat now that that's enabled. What is most important to these families that you're working with? So what's most important from the chat? We're hearing protecting the elder, right? The relationships. Yep. The safety of the parent. Yep. Keep typing the chat. What's most important to these families? Safety, security, not having to support the elder themselves, preserving the estate and happiness, safety and what the older adult wants, transparency. Good, great. Yes, those are all examples of what's important to these families. Now we're going to ask one more question, so you can type into the chat a different question here. What limitations or roadblocks do you see with the current system? So what we all have in common here is that we work with elders and we all have different roles in supporting the elder families. So I'm sure that we've all experienced our frustrations with the current system, and curious to hear what limitations or roadblocks have you experienced in the current system? So go ahead and type into the chat. And what we mean by that is, where are you seeing ineffective care for the elder? Where are you seeing ineffective protection of the elder? Where are you seeing ineffective preservation of the estate? Things like that. Okay, from the chat, as far as limitations and roadblocks, we're seeing it's set up as an adversarial system. Yes, not enough fiduciary resources unless the person's wealthy. Yes, that's a huge one. APS is a voluntary service, so the elder could theoretically refuse assistance, right? Elder person protecting a family member, right? So then it's not transparent or nothing's being done about it because the parent is protecting that family member. Good. Financial limitation regarding inability to work with the courts. We see a litigation as a limitation in itself. I am a former practicing lawyer and I agree. Limitation, the litigation is a limitation in itself. Judges don't know which side to believe. Yes, all voices are not heard. That's a huge one. Hard for folks with less money. Police say civil versus criminal. Good. Good. Thank you, everyone, for putting your thoughts into the chat and brainstorming. We'll move on, and we may have a chance to come back and look at some more chat input later. Thank you, everyone. So we are going to be sharing with you a specific style of mediation that you may not have heard of called integrative mediation. So this definition is from an organization called Integrative Mediation Bay Area, based in the San Francisco Bay Area. And that group, I used to be an active part of that group for years, and it's the group that really put integrative mediation on the map. So if you want to look at their website, it's imbayarea.com, and you can learn more about integrative mediation there. But the model has started to spread, and even Anaisa, my co-mediator based in Amsterdam, had learned about integrative mediation, and she and I now formed a pair of integrative mediators with each other. So this model really is spreading, and we hope that you will help to spread it after you learn about the advantages of it today. So I'll read here basically the definition of integrative mediation, and this is straight off IMBA's website, Integrative Mediation Bay Area. So integrative mediation, which we might call IM today, is a progressive approach to conflict resolution that addresses all aspects of a dispute: legal, financial, psychological, and emotional, maximizing the odds of a more efficient, cost-effective process and the achievement of a deeper, more comprehensive resolution. That's important. Cost-effective, when we compare mediation to litigation, usually mediation is a massive savings, usually. And a deeper, more comprehensive resolution. What we find when we bring the emotional side of the dispute into the process and we address it skillfully, we see that the agreements that come up in the mediation process are more durable, they're more lasting, because we're actually getting at the core of the conflict, which is the emotional side of the dispute. So when we address the emotional side of the dispute, we're actually hitting the roots of the conflict, and therefore in the process, we come to agreements that are more durable. Our approach typically pairs a lawyer mediator and a mental health professional mediator who jointly attend to all the needs of the parties in helping them to reach a mutually satisfactory and holistic resolution to their dispute. Other professionals, such as financial experts or child specialists, can be brought into the mediation on an as-needed basis. So in this pair, me and Anaisa, I have a law degree. I was a practicing lawyer in my past. So I bring the lawyer mediator role to the table. And Anaisa has a past in studying psychoanalysis and working on the mental health side of things. So she is the mental health professional mediator. Now we have some fun comics just so we can keep this light and funny. So first, can we agree that it's a big backyard? Which is highlighting the aspect in mediation that we often start with: what are some commonalities that we can agree on to help the parties in dispute realize that, hey, we actually have some things that we agree on. We actually have some beliefs in common, and that helps to create connection at the outset of a mediation process and helps to bring a softer side to the conversation.
Yeah, and to bring a little bit more of the global and historical context, and looking for like, what is the relationship, what is the place the elder have in our society? And our Western model tends to dismiss the elder, and like they're not productive in our society, in our economy anymore. So therefore they are now a burden people who need to be taken care of. And that is kind of an underlying limiting belief that is in the social, like, unconscious pattern that really affects how families relate to the elder. Of course, it's a big generalization. I'm sure there are exceptions here, but there are other cultures who actually honor the elder, and we want to bring that back. How to rescue that wisdom that is so honored among the elder in indigenous cultures, and you can see in the Maori culture, they were really seeking, like, for the elders to bring wisdom to the community, and they had that understanding in what affects one family affects the entire community. And so many examples of circles, family group conferencing, and circles of wisdom and consulting the elder, and the elders were usually the shamans in many tribes. So how can we bring that aspect and integrate that in our culture? So that's one reflection that we put out there on the underlying relationship that we have with people from, and that goes generation after generation, right? We will be the elders in a couple of decades from now, how we're going to be treated and how we're going to be relating to the new generations to come.
Yeah, so part of what we really try to do in integrative mediation is honor the elders' wisdom and bring their voice to the table and hold them as a valid member of the situation, which unfortunately some of our Western modern structures really dismiss the elder. I'm sure you've all experienced that in different ways, whether it's the medical side of the system or the legal side of the system. We've seen a lot of ways where the elder is minimized, and it's a real shame because they often hold the deepest wisdom and the deepest knowledge of the family relationships and family history. So another example here is the Arab reconciliation process, Shura, which is a conflict resolution model I've personally studied. It involves an elder council and seeking guidance from the elders of the tribe. And similar with the Native American talking stick, there's a circle, there's a talking circle. And I've also been blessed to be a part of different Native American tribes ceremonies and summer solstice gatherings in my life. And again, it's this idea that there's community involvement and wisdom from the elders, and everybody's voice matters. We're distinct from the litigation and law, which we're all steeped in now, which is a relatively new structure. It really comes from sort of the Old English Protestant background and discounts a lot of these traditional indigenous cultures' style of handling conflict, which was community involvement, circle processes, elders' wisdom. And now we see the court system, which is very much a top-down model. Someone wrote that in the chat box about the judge really has the ultimate say. And, you know, in all of these indigenous cultures, typically there was not one person who called the shots. There was a group of elders who used their pooled wisdom and perspectives to help the community. Okay, so I will give you a brief overview of what goes into the integrative mediation process. So some of this will be similar to other mediation models, and some of it will be different. Buy-in, so that first part is getting all of the participants buy-in, which means mediation is a voluntary process and people participate based on their choosing to participate. So it's important that we reach out to each party and explain the situation at hand and ask them if they're a yes to joining. And, you know, that's different from someone who gets a subpoena in a court and it's like you are forced to show up as a witness, or you're forced to show up as a party, or forced to show up as a defendant. So mediation is voluntary. And that has pluses and minuses. You know, the downside is if someone doesn't want to participate in mediation, we can't compel them to. Then other models of working through the conflict would need to be sought. But the upside is people who choose to participate are there because they want to be. And that equates to it being more likely that they're invested in the process and they're desiring to be there and they believe in a model of conflict resolution. So I'll move through these pretty quickly. After buy-in, we go to what happened. So there's a process of getting the story from different people. And it's important that we do one-on-one conversations with each participant prior to doing a joint session, because we build rapport with each person and we hear their side of the story. And we help them identify their interests, their needs, their goals, what's important to you. And so we do an intake with each individual participant, and then we have a broader sense of the situation. We have a broader sense of what are different persons' needs and goals and interests. And we create a lot of empathetic listening and understanding, which is very important for the person to feel like they've been heard and they've been understood, because by the time they get to mediation, there's enough problems in the space that they're likely not feeling empathized with or well understood by their family members. So we create the mediators, we create empathetic listening and understanding for them, which helps really calm their nervous system and shift them into the ability to listen and problem solve and brainstorm and different parts that we'll talk about on later slides. We highlight the distinction between intent and impact, which I think in most ways the legal system focuses on impact, not on intent. And therefore, if someone has, a positive intention, but things just turned out different from how they planned, they're still punished in the legal system. Whereas here in mediation, we can really listen to a person's story and listen to a person's intention and distinguish between the fact that
I thought I was frozen, but I think it's Kamela. Okay, let's give a second for Kamela to come back. Yeah. Yeah, she will reconnect and she has the slides. Yeah, so we will be continuing, even without the slides, I can carry on where Kamela was sharing with you. And it's pretty much like the aspects of mediation. One aspect that she was sharing is why that is so differently from the court, where we work with evidence and you work with disclosure. And in the mediation, everybody can share in a way that is very safe for them, because there are agreements in the field of confidentiality and so on, that this, whenever you share in a mediation process, is very much contained in that process, and it can be even protected from court. So you don't need to, like the parties, they wouldn't be able to use any of that as evidence if it's shared only and if only in the mediation process, which makes it very safe for people to step out of defensiveness and share more openly and speak their minds. Another thing that it's very important is to work on distinguishing between intention and impact. And that means everybody, we believe that everybody deep in there has some good intention, even if it's intention towards their own needs. There is a genuine intention, a human intrinsic intention there. Therefore, it's hard for them to see that they are causing negative impact on others. And on the other hand, they choose strategies that are impacting people in a negative way. So we work to clarify among the family members that what everybody's acting with a good intent. However, the negative impact can happen, and that those are two different things. Another thing we do in integrative mediation as well is shifting from blame to Kamela is back. I was just sharing with them a few of the notes that I had here in the background.
Perfect, thank you.
More. I was talking about the difference between intention and impact and how we make a distinction between them both.
Thank you. I am just getting permission from the host to share the screen. Sorry about that, everyone. My internet crashed, but I am back, and thank you for continuing, Anaisa.
Yeah.
As soon as I can share the screen, we will get that back. There we go. Okay. Thanks, Anaisa. How far did you get on these points?
We talked a little bit about the advantages of mediation being a confidential space, and while in the court you have to disclose many things to everybody in the mediation space. There are agreements in the field where people feel more safe to share and speak their mind. Therefore, we can go deeper into solving the problem.
Great, thank you.
And we also talked about a little bit more about intention versus impact.
Great, great, thank you. So regulating the nervous system and trauma responses is a very big part of what we do different from other mediation models. And that's where having a person who's trained in mental health is a really key component to the integrative mediation model. So imagine people in conflict, they are riled up by nature, by definition, their nervous systems are under stress. And so we know a lot about the neuropsychology of conflict and of stress and of how to move people from an activated state into a more regulated state, because from that more regulated state, that's where we're able to use the parts of our brain that are able to listen to each other and are able to brainstorm and problem solve. So if we can't access listening parts of our brain and problem solving parts of our brain, we really do not have a good chance at successful conflict resolution models. And we'll talk more about addressing mental health challenges and problematic behaviors. We'll talk more about how we discharge emotions and heal past wounds. These are all part of the process. And towards the end of a mediation session, or towards the end of multiple mediation sessions, just depending on how long it takes till we get to this stage, we move into brainstorming options and solutions that take into account all needs. And we work towards reaching win-win-win agreements. So that means each person involved in the mediation walks away from the agreement feeling like their needs have been met and they feel actually positive in their being towards the outcome, which is really distinct from litigation, where we pretty much always have a winner and a loser. Best case scenario, most people believe that it's more like a loser and a loser, because truly needs aren't being met. There might be a winner in the sense that they got a ruling in their favor, but if we talk to them in more depth and understand what are all of their needs, emotional needs included, they probably did not get all of their needs met in that court process. And then there's always the option. Go ahead.
I want to add that I think it's such an important point. And the reason why we can go there is because we discharge the emotions first. Usually in a litigation, a lot of the requests are based on negative emotions that are based on trying to take something from someone. And once all these negative emotions and feelings are discharged, people open more the space to have a win-win negotiation. So that's why we are able to go deeper into this agreement.
Mm-hmm. And Anaisa, I'm reading a question in the Q&A feature around grief. So I'll let you address this one, Anaisa. The person is asking, how do we work with someone who has difficulties moving through grief to see the other viewpoints?
Yeah, grief is a very human process, is a emotion and needs to be processed and not suppressed. We have to understand what is natural and what is moves to more pathological. but it can take about 6 months on average for a person to process grief around a loss, around losing a family member or losing a job or something that is very much attached to their own personal identity. The most powerful way that I found to deal with grief is a Tibetan meditation that is very simple, that I help my clients in breathing in all the pain and breathing out love and compassion, and combining breath and bringing them back to the sensations in the body. It's very helpful to shift from the stories they are creating in their head that remind them of the suffering of the loss, and bring them back to the present moment. And this meditation, doing it every day, I've seen very, very powerful results from that. It's the simplest one, and it's one that I always use in delicate situations when involves grief.
Beautiful, thank you. And a couple extra points on grief. Anaisa mentioned this, but to highlight it a little more, grief is a long process. So part of working with grief is really helping people understand that there's many stages to grief. Many of you are probably familiar with the Kubler-Ross model of grief. So we help people understand there's a process, there's this arch of moving through grief. And sometimes it looks like anger and rage, and sometimes it looks like sadness and depression. So we help normalize this range of emotions as part of processing grief. We help bring patience into the game, and we help them move their emotions too. So we're skilled in various forms of what I call emotional release techniques. So this is another way that our type of mediation is really unique compared to court-ordered mediation. We will help people process their emotions real time in the mediation. We will help them do emotional release techniques. So for grief, one of the emotional release techniques that I use is helping people wail. So it's using sound. Sound moves emotions. So I literally will have them move their shoulders back and raise their head back and wail, oh, 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 oh. And it's kind of like fake it till you make it, you know? We'll tell them, just start making the sound, just start wailing. And usually that triggers the actual emotions underneath, and it allows people to start feeling and moving the actual grief. So moving on here, we'll talk through some of the components of why mediation works so well.
Yeah, so those are the key ingredients that we use. And the first one is, as I mentioned before, confidentiality. And that means honoring the agreement we have with each and every participant involved. And that means not sharing with anybody else vulnerable things that can jeopardize the situation. Second is ground rules. It's very important that we set a safe container with very clear rules on how things are going to be communicated, and what frequency, what format, what is permitted in the mediation space, what is not permitted in the mediation space, and to keep the space very healthy. To have a neutral facilitator. One of the biggest complaints when people go into mediation and things go wrong is because the mediation can't be neutral. The mediator tends to have opinion or bias towards one or another participant. Willingness to participate, that is key. Just show up, that's yes, I'm showing up and I will give it a try. Curiosity surrounding the family story and history, exploration of solutions. So instead of me against you, let's come together and take a step back and see how we can solve all these needs that are brought to the table. To have a safe environment, as I mentioned before, flexibility of processes. We have a methodology. At the same time, we can't be rigid because we are dealing with human beings, and we have to constantly assess how much we can push everyone. We can't overstretch because it is very uncomfortable for many people to step into mediation. And to also work with self-empowerment of the participants. In psychology, we talk about the triangle: victim, villain and rescuer, and many people tend to find themselves in one of these three edges of the triangle, and that can be very unhealthy pattern. You can't go much further with this pattern, so we want to break that triangle and find everybody, bringing everybody to their self-empowered, responsible adult self, and we help them to reframe their story, because a lot of the misunderstandings come from the story each person is telling in their head, and each story is so different, so we want to find the common story.
We help folks clarify facts versus assumptions, which is similar to helping them identify the story in their head. Humans are making assumptions left, right, and center all the time. So we help them identify, hey, that's an assumption. You don't actually know that's a fact. And when we get down to it, there's often a lot of assumptions, and we clear them out of the way. There is a choice in integrative mediation to have a binding agreement. And, I work mostly with families, and often they don't choose that, right? It just depends on the situation, but they have the choice of having a written agreement that they all sign that's then binding in court. But my sweet spot is really working with families that are not about suing each other and going to court. So they don't usually want that. They are just grateful to have a facilitator to help them through the challenges they're dealing with. And at the end of the mediation process, they're in better communication with each other. The, elder's situation is better, whether it's housing or finances or mental health. So the family often feels better through the mediation process and doesn't feel like they need the protection in court. Everyone participates. This is, different from court, where it's often only involving a couple people when really a whole family is affected. So this is where it looks a lot more like restorative justice circles, where we involve all the people that are really the main players in the equation, because their voices matter and they have insights that might be useful in the problem-solving process. It's a transformative process. A lot of people feel like they've been through some form of healing process after they finish mediation with us. We collectively work towards resolution. We value the humanness of everyone. This is also a real short-sighted part of the legal system. The legal system's so punitive that there's not much space for everyone's humanness, everyone making mistakes. The fact that we have the ability to forgive each other, that's not really built into the litigation model. And we focus on those parts of humanness, that we all make mistakes. And when we can understand why a person did what they did and what their needs were at the time, it's a lot easier to forgive them and come towards a true resolution, which involves a healing process. New levels of understanding come through this. We create positive emotion in this type of mediation process. We create feelings of positive emotions, such as forgiveness, such as gratitude for each other. Now that we've gotten through the humanness and the mistakes, and we've come to renewed partnership in making choices. And think of siblings working together to care for their parent. They may have been at odds for decades. I mean, often they are. When we work with adult siblings, sometimes you hear things from high school prom. Mom gave you the Mustang. You got to drive the Mustang. I didn't get to drive the Mustang. Or mom gave you her wedding dress. She didn't give it to me. Like sometimes these things go back to when people are teenagers or in their 20s. And so we're able to clear literally decades of built up anger and problems between siblings through this process of really listening to each other and understanding each other and moving towards cooperating for their parent, for their shared parent. Value on family relationships, we've talked about that a lot. And it can, and this process, mediation, can go along simultaneously with the court process. It's not one or the other. And, often we do see court-ordered mediation in family cases, which is great that exists. However, in my opinion, a lot of those mediation processes are not as positive of an outcome as something like this type of mediation process would be. And so all of this leads to And Anaisa and I had fun with this fact. You've seen different statistics and different studies around how effective is mediation, and sometimes they're in the 75 to 90% success range. And Anaisa and I changed this on our slide to 99% because our true history and our work as mediators for years and years and years is that almost every single time there is a form of agreement, a form of improved relationships. So ours is really pretty much 100% success rate.
I think a big part of that is because I consider we are extremely patient, and once the person says yes, the hardest part is for them to say yes. So once they say yes and they commit to the process, we have that success rate, because that's actually what is needed, is the willingness to resolve. Yeah, we skip. Yeah, that's okay.
This one illustrates, this is basically our court model in some ways. Fight, 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 bring out your weapons and fight.
And when people want to fight, they actually want to be heard and they want to be seen. So we do a lot of work. We invest a lot in listening, and talking a little bit about how we integrate the body and the mind. I think that's a very special aspect of that work. We tend to go to court or to talk to clients, and everything in our world is so much in the mind, in the words, and we tend to forget how we feel in our bodies. So the mediation sessions, we bring people back to their bodies as well, to synchronize, to bring them to the here and now. So we take into account the physiological responses and their body language. Many times, just before everybody meets in a mediation session, people feel nausea, people feel like sweaty hands, and they feel like choking or fainting or blurred vision. And those are all neurological responses to the unknown, because they are terrified just before a mediation session. So we have to address those. We can't just ignore that. And even during the session, if anybody's going through a lot of physiological response, we have to step back and take a deep breath. I think taking care of everybody's physiological responses, especially when we're dealing with elder, is so fundamental, because we have, like, neurologically, we have some plasticity and we can't go further than that. That would be mediation abuse. We don't want to abuse that. So we really have to take care of everybody in the room, and also bringing like the tender hearts when it comes to family relationships. There is so much that is here in the chest, and like we have those things, speaking up your mind, speaking your heart, and many times we have conflict between these two in ourselves, and that creates so much of the outer conflict. So we also take care of people's hearts, and also the physical heart, the heart, the pressure, the blood pressure, and all of that. We spoke already about nervous system regulation tools and co-regulation tools, and we use a lot of breath for that, and sound and movement, and guided visualizations, like tricks to calm the nervous system very quickly. Also to move from the reptilian brain to the frontal cortex, because when you are with the reptilian brain activated, you are in survival mode, you tend to go into defensiveness, to freeze. And how can we just make you feel safe in your body during a session, so you can think clearly and you can communicate what you need to your counterpart. We shift the story they are telling themselves, what I said before, just reinforcing that. We also, so the mediation process is very structured. We help people actually in reframing and choosing the words and retelling their story to themselves first and then to others in a way that is more empowered, not from the victim perspective. Moving out of selfish behavior. And that is when people tend to be selfish and care only about their own needs, they tend to be self-absorbed, and then they are not capable to have empathy for the other, or to try to understand what is their counterpart's needs, because they are in survival mode and they need to make sure they get their needs met. So there is so much there going on for that person. So we have compassion for the selfish, and we help them understanding the cost of being in that position and how much better it would be for them to open their understanding. We talk about trauma and trauma responses. We tend to think trauma is such a bad thing, or someone who suffers trauma or sexual abuse or violence. It is, and it can be someone who never had any serious episodes in their lives, but over a lifetime, you build very small situations of trauma that you don't even notice. But over a lifetime, your nervous system is more contracted and shut down and needs to protect yourself. So we have to be aware of those things as well. Sometimes people are laughing and we don't understand, but that's also a trauma response, like or over explaining themselves is a trauma response. So we have to catch that and notice that person is somehow not feeling safe in their body right now. I use the analogy like going to a surgery. Entering a mediation session is like going to a surgery. It's very uncomfortable. It is very delicate, deep, risky, or the perception of exposing yourself with your counterparts. But we were actually removing a lot of crap there. You were removing a lot of murky, like old things that were never addressed before. And there was such a feeling of relief after the mediation sessions. And there is also time for integration. Like when you come out of surgery, you need a couple of days or weeks to recover, to close, and to have this scar tissue that very well formed and developed. So there's also this integration phase we see from people. It takes a couple of days for them to let it all sink in. We work with positive emotions as well, and that connecting to the body, positive emotions bring more cell growth, more neuroplasticity, and that increases a lot the success, the outcome of the mediation. So by integrating emotional, physiological, mental, and social aspects, the environment where this person lives, what is their culture, what is their generational reference, taking into account all of that, actually is part of the integrative mediation.
So we are going to do a little demo for you all to get a sense of how active listening helps to calm the nervous system. So this is where we bring empathy to a person who is feeling like they're in a victim role. So in this little demo we have for you, Anaisa will be the person with the problem, the person in the victim role, and I will be the mediator, active listening her.
Okay. So can I share with you, Kamela, my problem?
Yeah, I'd love to hear what you're dealing with. Please share with me a little bit about the story from your experience.
Yeah, so what is happening is that my father is very much attached to his company, and he's already like not thinking clearly, and I really think he should sell it all or sell like the inventory and just retire, but he doesn't want to do that, and he's asking us to lend him money. And I lended money to him 10 years ago, and he couldn't ever pay me back. And I swore to myself I will never do that again. And my sister just lended money to my father, and she lost a house because of that. And it's really, I tried to alert her, but she doesn't regret. I can't. It's really a struggle for me. I'm concerned about my parents' financial health in these final years of their life, and I only see the money. Every money that is in my father's hands just goes to this down the drill, you know. And I really want to find a way to connect with my brother and my sister to open my father's eyes and to convince him to actually sell his company and stop working.
Yeah, wow. Oh, Anaisa. Oh, yeah, that sounds challenging. I mean, on one level, just dad's mental decline alone is a hard thing to witness, to see our fathers becoming less able to take care of themselves and less able to do their businesses or their finances. So I imagine just that alone is hard to see and hard for your siblings and hard for your dad too. It's like for him to be experiencing his own mental decline is, yeah. And then it sounds like there's a whole situation with his business where you're noticing him making poorer decisions with his money. And do you feel like it's gotten to the point where it would make the most sense for him to sell his company? But it sounds like he's being a little stubborn with that. He's not seeing eye to eye with you on that. And he's asking for you and your siblings to lend him money, which it sounds like it's causing an even bigger challenge for your family because you've already lent him money and it's been a problem in the past and you don't want to lend him money again. So it feels like you're wanting to get your siblings to support you in suggesting that your dad sell his company and help him come to the terms that it's time to do that. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's very, very accurate. That's right. It's how I'm feeling, and that's what I need. That's what I want. Thank you so much for understanding it and for seeing it.
Yeah, and it sounds like that might lead to some feelings of frustration with your dad, with your siblings, maybe some sadness and feeling ineffective at helping, or maybe even feeling guilty at not wanting to lend him money when he's asking for it. Do you relate to any of those feelings, or what feels most true to you?
I relate to the feelings. I don't relate to feeling guilty, but I do relate to feeling frustrated and concerned about their future. But I did feel guilty in the past. I've been working on that. So you are right that it was there, but not so strong anymore.
Yeah. Good for
Mm.
you. Well, I acknowledge you for the work you've done so far to shift from the place you felt in the past, feeling guilty, to it sounds like coming to a place where you're comfortable in your boundaries and you're comfortable in that choice to not lend your dad more money. I know it can be hard to tell a parent no when we want to help and you're able to see that that's not necessarily the best way to help, that it might not actually help. So yeah, I acknowledge you for doing that work, and I hear that there's definitely still some feelings of frustration.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing vulnerably with me. I appreciate it, and I really feel you.
thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's just a little example, and I'm curious, write in the chat what you noticed effective in that way of listening. It would be great to hear what you noticed rather than me telling you or Anaisa telling you what works well. And some of you may have already been trained in active listening. This is a really, really useful skill for everybody's role, whatever your role is, and working with elders and working with families that are dealing with elder care. Just the simple act of active listening from a place of empathy really helps people feel like they're brought into the process, like their opinion matters, their values matter, their voice matters. And from there, we can, we could unpack more. What does this person want? And how can we support them? So yeah, feel free to type in the chat what did you see worked? When Kamela took a deep breath, Anaisa took a deep breath and relaxed. Yeah, I love that you noticed that. That's really key. And that's one of the ways we work with clients a lot is we will start regulating our nervous system. And because humans are wired with mirror neurons, that saying monkey see, monkey do with children, that's not just happenstance. That's actually how our brains are wired. We see something and we do it. So one of the easiest ways to begin to support someone in regulating their nervous system is for us, the mediators, and you, the professional, to take a deep breath and actually to sigh on the exhale. Our body is cued that when we sigh, it relaxes our nervous system. So that's another hack That's another link. If you go to yoga practices, you know, there'll often be the cue, let yourself sigh. That's because that sigh is an effective way to immediately begin relaxing our nervous system. Some of the other comments from the chat, mirroring, yep, we were just saying that, yep. Paraphrasing, yeah. Facial expression, yeah, that's important, and too bad it can't be done with phone conversation. So that's one of the things that I really love about the Zoom world that has boomed as of COVID, where at least I'm talking way less on the phone and just audio and way more on Zoom with video. And that is key to being able to see people's facial expressions and body expressions, because we get a lot of nonverbal cues when it relates to how is a person doing in their nervous system and how are they processing this conflict. A lot of that information comes from nonverbal cues. Yeah, few people are articulate about expressing their feelings. This is not typically what we see in mediation. That's true. Active listening is demonstrating and reiterating what you thought you heard and asking if that's accurate. It's an effective technique. Yeah, so it's true. Often people are not as good at expressing their emotions, and that's why I modeled to you me intuiting, hey, you might be feeling frustration or you might be feeling guilt. And that helps them prompt their brain around, oh, am I feeling those emotions? And then, you know, I might get one wrong. Like Anaisa said, well, I'm not feeling guilt. I used to feel that, but I'm not now. It's okay if you guess something wrong. It's part of the interactive process where we're prompting them to think about something more deeply. And then we're checking in to say, are you feeling guilt or not? And then they have the opportunity to explain and to do that inventory inside themselves.
Especially because we don't have, in general, people don't have good vocabulary to express feelings.
Yeah. Yeah. So we actually can help them with the vocabulary by offering words and then checking in. Do you resonate with that? Yeah, reflecting back to the person helps in acknowledging the information is communicated and understood. Exactly. It seems so simple watching it, but if you've had people active listen to you, it is so effective. And we are really attuned at tracking people's nonverbal cues. So after effectively active listening someone, you will notice their nervous system is beginning to settle. Their breath is going slower or deeper. Their face is more relaxed instead of tight. All of that can happen just from an effective active listening session. Thanks everyone for your comments in the chat. Okay, so this is really relevant for you in your profession. We're going to help you synthesize when is it definitely a very good fit and when might it be a good fit. And this really applies for you all in thinking, you know, when would it be appropriate for me to refer a family I'm working with out to mediators? So on the very good fit side, we know mediation is a good fit when there's ongoing relationships. People care about the person they're in conflict with, and they just need some support getting through the challenges because they want to preserve that relationship. It's a very good fit when people desire resolution and desire transformation. And point blank, I will tell you that is not true for everyone. Not everyone is a good fit for mediation. So if people really don't care about the person, they don't care about transforming, they don't care about resolving, then I will tell them, go ahead and sue someone in court. I hope that works for you. When there's an absence of threats of violence, coercion, abuse, right? Typically, we want there to be an absence of threats and coercion and abuse in order for mediation to work. People will bring up the topic of dementia. When an elder has dementia, does that rule out mediation? And no, you know, when an elder has severe dementia, then we will work with the siblings without the elder. So my philosophy is I always want to involve the elder if they have enough mental capacity to be involved in the conversations. If they're really far down the dementia spectrum, then I will say, okay, it's better for them not to be involved, and let's just work among the siblings. willingness to consider others' perspectives and or to have a shift in perspective. You know, that's important. It's like that's part of what we talk about when we do the one-on-one intakes with each participant before we get to the joint session. We're checking, is this person able to consider other perspectives? Is this person able to examine their own story they're telling themselves and maybe put it aside for a moment to listen to the other person's story and understand that these are two valid stories. Each of us has our valid subjective experience in our life. And a lot of mediation is helping our clients get out of the commitment they have to their story being right and their willingness to listen to someone else's story and understand that for that person, their story is valid for them, and for you, your story is valid for you.
Yeah, we are asked the question, but what if the person has a severe mental illness or they have like a very active addiction of any sort? I would say many people might have a different opinion. They would say, no, then we wouldn't handle those cases. But Kamela and I, we were discussing that, and may be a good fit, even in cases of severe mental illness and serious active addiction. So, like, taking into account that all like the aspects were checked, you know, there is desire to resolve, there is desire to transform, there is willingness. And also when you use the word severe, it's subjective. How severe is severe? You know, how much is too much? It is more complex when it involves disease or addiction. You have to take into account the mediator's comfort level and capacity to deal with mental illness, the counterpart's emotional resilience. So if you have someone in the family with Alzheimer, for example, like how resilient are the children to deal with that and to be present with that family member and investigating what are their needs or their ultimate desires or needs. So it requires way more patience for everybody involved. And it's important to have a strong support system. So in that case, you have doctors, you have therapists, you have other people involved directly in supporting it. And of course, we have to understand that it might be more limiting how much agreement we can achieve, but it doesn't mean that we have to rule out right away. There is room to bring that family or that elder in a better situation than they were before. So the mediation is still supportive in more severe cases as well. So that's a bit of the invitation to open your mind to possibilities, taking into account you would have the right support system for that.
Mm-hmm. We've got one more funny comic for you. Rock, paper, scissors. Jameson, the mediator, uses his last remaining negotiating tool in an effort to break the stalemate. In integrative mediation, it's way less likely that we would arrive at a stalemate. You see a stalemate, which is, you know, where the parties are just stuck. It's like one party's gone to their minimum lowest bottom line and the other party's gone to their highest upper limit and they're not yet connecting. That's typical negotiation. They're typically talking dollars and cents. That's what we see in mediation in the court. And it's not the same in the mediation we do. We're not just negotiating dollars and cents. We are talking about a very holistic, comprehensive relational system that involves emotions and the legal parts and the financial parts. So honestly, I've never gotten to a stalemate in any mediations because there's always parts that are workable. There's always parts that are moving towards resolution. There might be parts that they don't agree on, and that is okay, and that does happen. But there's always parts that are moving towards understanding and towards resolution. Okay, so we'll be moving into questions and answers in a moment. We want to just give you our contact info here so you can write it down. I know that you have these slides in your handouts. One of the things that we offer on both of our websites, on integrate legacy.com and safe-mediation.com, I'll put those in the chat for everyone. Both of us offer complimentary consultations. So it's very easy to go to our website and book a 15-20 minute conversation so you can chat with us about the scenario you're dealing with and ask us, does this seem like a ripe fit for mediation? And we'll talk through it with you and let you know. And it's perfect for you to reach out. You as the professional working with the family, you might have a family that you're thinking, is this a good mediation option? So you can reach out to us for a complimentary consultation. We'll chat with you. You'll give us some of the facts of the case, and we'll let you know if we think it's worth moving forward, which would be then us reaching out to the different people in the family, the different participants, and scheduling the one-on-one conversations with each of them, and then eventually moving towards a joint session with everyone. And Anaisa has a really exciting training coming up to share with you too.
Yes, I am going to launch a training for mediation practitioners who want to refine their skills, or for those who are somehow involved in mediation cases and want to just think more like a mediator. So we're going to be going through the core fundamental skills in mediation, the more advanced aspects on how to build more neutrality, how to build more of that resilience as a mediator, and those virtues of patience, and that actually can make a difference in more complex cases. Like we work a lot with biases and how, checking in about cognitive biases as a mediator, and how to calibrate and refine your skills on that setting. We also add a lot what is especially new in this training. And the reason we are putting together this training on safe mediation is because we've been asked by many people who went through mediation processes with us, or people from support systems of our clients, wanting to know how do you do it. And the embodiment component, the emotional release techniques that are like lifesavers, in situations of some emergency, you are in a room and someone starts panicking or shaking, what do you do? So we put all of that as well in the training. Very practical tools, very experiential tools. It's case-based. We discuss cases. We do a lot of practices between the modules. So if you are somehow interested in knowing more, or knowing if that could be something for you that would meet your needs, or the level you are, or your willingness to expand your skills, you can also book a consultation with me, and we can have a call about that. And I will be soon. You can also sign up for the newsletter at safemediation.com, and I will be sending more information, brochure, and dates with you. It's about to be more details to be published in a few days, but I'm just announcing a pre-launch for you all firsthand.
Wonderful. Thank you, Anaisa. So we'll move into some Q&A now, and we have our moderator, Jenny, who will be helping with the questions you submitted through the Q&A chat feature. So if you have a question, you have not yet submitted it, please write it into that Q&A chat feature, and we'll start going through them right now.
Thank you, Kamela and Anaisa. It was an amazing presentation. It's so important to consider family history and trauma when working to resolve emotionally charged situations. We have about 10 minutes for Q&A, so if there's anything we aren't able to get answered, we can definitely follow up after the presentation. And Kamela did my job for me. As a reminder, if you have anything to ask, go ahead and put it in the Q&A. If anyone wants to be able to see all of us on screen and you don't currently see the three of us, you can click on speaker view in the top right corner of your screen. So we'll go ahead and get to the first question, which is, can the things that were brought at mediation be subpoenaed and be disclosed at a court hearing if the mediation fails?
Thank you. That's an extremely important question. No, 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 and no. One of the really beautiful things about our legal system is that it protects the confidentiality of what is said in a mediation very well, 100%. So one of the questions we've been dealing with right now in our private practices is, because now we're doing mediations on Zoom, so someone could theoretically be recording in the background without anyone knowing. They could have a little recording device on, their cell phone. And so people are asking us, well, what if someone is secretly recording in the background? So our answer is, it's true that we can't technically stop someone from secretly recording because they'd be doing it without us knowing too. However, the good news is if someone were to take that secret recording and present it in a later court case or in a simultaneous court case, the court would automatically, categorically exclude it as evidence. Immediately, the court would say that was taken during mediation. We cannot hear that. We cannot present that as evidence. So there's very strong confidentiality in mediation.
Yeah, there are a few exceptions for that, depending on the country. Like if you as a mediator come to be reported a situation of child abuse, for example, in certain countries, because it's a crime against a child, you have to report the crime. But like in general, what Kamela said is the truth, not only in the United States, but in Europe. Like that's a general practice in most of the courts that we are aware of. And we deal with many international cases. At Safe Mediation, we have clients from America, from Europe, and Middle Eastern as well.
Thank you. I think this one's also related, and that is, if either party breached, do we, with the attorney, or I guess, sue for breach of contract? If is this done via ex parte or regular civil case?
If they breach
So I guess if
the
they
mediation agreement, I'm
Yeah.
guessing. Yeah. So let's say there is a mediation agreement that's signed by the parties that is binding in court, then yes, there can be a breach of contract action if someone sues. And that is kind of the whole point of a binding agreement. So if someone wants a binding agreement, they want to be able to sue for breach of contract in the future. I actually don't know if that's ex parte or not. I apologize. I've never done litigation, so ask a litigator. And did that answer all the questions, or was there another part?
That was it from that.
Okay.
Those two were both from the same person. And then we just have a few more here, which are, how do you work with domestic violence situations where there's a great imbalance of power in the relationship and the abuser will continue to manipulate the victim in the face-to-face mediation?
Yeah. Do you want to start with that, Anaisa, and then I'll add anything?
Yeah, I want to start with that. Well, that's a situation that mediation is not there to conceal anything. We really need to make sure that real behavioral transformation occurs. And there are situations that, of course, you can't transform in a few weeks. So maybe the best agreement or the best outcome that everybody found after the empowerment is to take some distance and to prevent violence to happen again. But if there is a desire to change, if there is and we work with abusers as well in our practice, when there is a desire in them to change and to stop, and they are already in their behavioral change, and then we enter with restorative justice. That is an alternative system that actually addresses the harm caused and gives the abuser the opportunity to see all the harm that they are causing to others. And of course, that has to be done in conjunction with therapists and many other practitioners in the support system. Kamela, you want to add to that?
Yeah, so we work a lot with abusive power dynamics. Anaisa talked a little bit about this at the beginning. One of the specialty areas for Safe Mediation, Anaisa's company, which is based in Amsterdam, one of our specialties is working with consent violations in a sexual context and boundary violations in a sexual context. And we work in the Tantra field where there's power dynamics where a Tantra teacher has done a consent violation or a boundary violation or an abuse of power with a student. So we're often dealing with very sensitive issues of abuse of power. A little different from DV. It's not domestic violence, but it is power dynamics. And often the victim feels like there's been abuse. So we work with this a lot. What I can say is that I'm pretty confident that we hold a safe space in the Zoom room or in the live room. That's part of our role. And I would say we do that really well, even when it's an actual DV situation. I have worked a lot with domestic violence survivors at a different part of my career in the past. So I'm very familiar with DV, and I'm good at creating a safe space. And that requires us to be strong sometimes and stop someone from interrupting and stop them from, speaking the way they're speaking and saying, hey, that is not appropriate here. We will not tolerate that kind of communication or that kind of, action. So we're good at keeping a safe space in the mediation. Of course, we don't then reach into their home or their work environment. So our jurisdiction, if you will, is only so far. But in the situations where there is DV, that's when I would be more likely to urge them to do a binding agreement so that the person in the survivor role has a legal recourse. If the abuser breaks the agreement, then they can do breach of contract. And I just want to make a comment here on one of the chats that was written to the host and panelists, not to everyone. I'm guessing, Bennett, you might be a lawyer. Bennett wrote, it's a felony to record conversations unless all parties approve of the recording. So that's another aspect we didn't mention. If someone is recording sneakily, first, they're breaking the mediation agreement because we have parties sign an agreement before the mediation gets officially underway. And one of the parts they're signing that they agree to is that they will not record. So A, they're breaking the mediation contract, and there's another breach of contract for that. But B, it's a felony to, at least in the US, and I'm not sure under EU courts, but it's probably a crime under EU courts as well. I just don't know if it would be a misdemeanor or a felony. So, there's a criminal action against someone if they record sneakily in a mediation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I think you maybe addressed a little bit at the end, but how does the family get referred to you? Do they self-refer? How could someone get to you if they wanted to use mediation?
Yeah, so it's often through two routes, through the self-referral. So one member of the family learns about mediation, thinks it's a good idea, and comes to us. And they say, hey, here's the situation with my siblings, with my parent. Can we mediate this? So that's a common inflow. Another common inflow is through professionals such as yourself, professionals that work with elders. You're seeing the family dynamics. And other, I'm not sure the whole range of professions in this group, but one example comes to mind right now is professional fiduciaries. I used to work a lot with professional fiduciaries when I was a trust and estates lawyer. And the professional fiduciaries are really in the family home often. They're seeing the family dynamics. So they're often really aware of when there's conflict or when there's abusive situations. And because they're handling the finances, they're very aware of when there's, potential financial elder abuse. So the professionals that work with elders and work with families are a really, really, really good source of referral to mediators.
Thank you. Oh, my light went off. And then this one's a little bit long. And I think this will probably be our final question unless something really short pops in after. So do you have experience in working on mediations with families where an older adult is a chronic victim of transnational technology facilitated fraud scams? I know that was a lot of words. Where perpetrators are overseas, so that the person may have sent all of their money, such as in a romance imposter fraud or fake lottery sweepstake. And they just wrapped that up with a lot of those victims are involved in these frauds for years. And it's very difficult for families, APS, and other professionals to intervene in a positive way to stop the family members' involvement in the continued fraud.
Yeah, I had a case last year that was exactly that. And the old lady, she transferred a lot of the money to buy some Iranian, like some weird currency. And she was firmly convinced that she did the right thing and she was believing in all of that. So it took a lot of rapport and building trust with her, and it went through active listening again. So really listening to her and giving her the dignity, and not treating her like as a stupid, like dumb, but treating her with dignity and trying to understand what she was believing in and why she was believing in that and what were the needs behind. So like conversations to open that door with her so she could start listening to the arguments, and she could start realizing and giving her the autonomy to realize for herself the trap that she fell in, because it's really painful for them to admit that they fell in a trap. because that's shaking their identity. It's really hard for a human being to admit that. So we really work, it is possible. And we can advise the family on how to work with the parent in that scenario. Like, we can advise on how to hold the communication and get the message across. Yeah.
Yeah, and what's most likely in scenarios like that, because as you outlined in your question, it's complicated with international courts and basically hackers that are super skilled in hiding their identity. So it's unlikely that we're gonna, in mediation, find the hacker and create like a monetary justice there. That's not really what we're able to do. But what we are able to do, like Anaisa said, is work with the elder to support them in their emotions, work with the family members of the elder, and ultimately we can help stop it from happening more. We might not be able to bring justice for what's already happened, but we're able to get them to the place where it's not going to happen anymore. And I'll just put a little note in there that a style of conflict resolution that I've been trained in is called conflict coaching. And that's what Anaisa outlined, where we work one-on-one with a party in a conflict where we're not able to work with the other parties. That might be because international fraud, we can't identify them. Or it might be because the other person does not want to come to the table. Like Anaisa said, that's actually the hardest part in mediation, is getting people to the table. Once we've gotten their buy-in, we are likely to have a successful process. So if a person won't come to mediation, but the person who came to us wanting mediation still wants support, we have different coaching tools and techniques where we can work with them one-on-one to help them rebuild their sense of self and their dignity, and help them build their boundaries in a better way and stop what's happening where they feel victimized.
Thank you. That was a really great answer from both of you. And so with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up today's program and share a few reminders for everyone. First off, thank you, Kamela and Anaisa, for your insightful presentation. You can go ahead, unless you want to stay on and I thank our sponsors again, you can go ahead and turn your screens off. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your participation.
And thank you again to the sponsors of our webinar series. Today's presentation and recording will be available on the LAS website following the conclusion of the series. If you need CEU credits, please look for our post-event email in your inbox in the next 48 hours with further instructions. We welcome your feedback about this webinar so that we can continue improving the content we provide and on your experience. A link will be included in the post-event email. We invite you to sign up for the rest of our webinar series by visiting the LAS website at lashicap.org and going to events. Our next program is Understanding Non-Economic Damages in Elder Financial Abuse Litigation on Tuesday, October 11th from 12 p.m. to 1:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. For any questions or comments about today's webinar or the program as a whole, you can email us at conference@lashicap.org. Thank you again for joining us today. We wish you a great rest of your week.